I'm so glad that the Fusion World digital client exists.
But it's a little broken.
Hey everybody, Espira, and it's been about a month since the release of Fusion World. Shy of 3 weeks to 4 weeks, something in the ballpark. We've kind of now settled into the way that the economy works, the way gameplay works, and how the whole infrastructure comes together. And I think now is time for a more cohesive conversation about what currently is available on the client, kind of how everything works around with the way that all the systems are built, and see different ways that we may progress or make improvements on current existing systems for the sake of player growth, player retention, and just overall quality of life experience. Now, I have to start off by saying I do love that the digital client is out. I love the fact that I'm able to pick up and play anytime, anywhere, and that for the most part, the accessibility of the game is pretty good if you're willing to put some money in. That part being a big caveat. So if you're happy with the way that the client works, which for a lot of it I am, especially with a lot of the side features that I wasn't even expecting to get in the first place, then by all means, keep enjoying it. However, I do see some problems that I think are going to be exponentially worse if there's not any specific address to the way things currently are. First and foremost, I think it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of the way that the economy currently works in Fusion World. It's a system that currently rewards those who own or would like to own everything, while also not really being considerate to those who are looking to just get in, be introduced to, or get a taste of what the game can provide. In that, I think the biggest culprit is the crafting system. And I don't even feel good calling it a crafting system, specifically because it is more of an abundance system than a curation system. A crafting system is supposed to enable you to be able to build and play the decks that you want to, oftentimes at the cost of your collection. When we look at different card games, they allow you to dust certain cards to be able to build other cards. Usually we're looking at a 3-to-1 ratio where the destruction of 3 cards is able to get you 1 card of that same rarity, but it differs depending on if they allow you to destroy your own collection or not. There are wildcard systems like in Magic the Gathering Arena, similar to the way that wildcards work in Fusion World. The biggest whiff in Fusion World side is the fact that the curation part of it doesn't exist. It is purely an abundance system. You can't get wildcards through any other means than already having a 4 of a specific card that then feeds into a 5-to-1 ratio. I don't particularly mind the ratio being worse than the other competitors when you include the fact that it is cheaper to get into packs in Fusion World, both from a gem perspective or if you're using promo codes. And that's the hard part that's part of this conversation. When you're willing to put money in to own everything, Fusion World actually comes out to being pretty affordable. You can get code cards at, anywhere between 50 to 70 cents a piece, which means it's not that hard to get the about 150 to 180 packs, depending on your RNG, to own most of the set. And for a lot of other digital clients, that is hyper affordable, which is super sick. The problem lives in that gap that lives between wanting to own everything and not wanting to own everything. I could put $60 into the client, open a ballpark 60 packs, and not be able to play anything that I want. If I'm a blue player, but I open all red cards, there's nothing that I can do to curate my experience besides just opening more packs. And unfortunately, that player experience is really bad when we're talking about people who are trying to introduce themselves to the game or are trying to curate the little funds that they have to play specifically the way that they want to. At the moment, your picks on what you can play in Fusion World are all based on the RNG simulator of what you get in your packs outside of the starter decks. This is exacerbated by the fact that, for SRs, there are multiple rarities of given cards. You have the base version, you have the alt arts, and then both of those versions themselves have premium versions which have animated effects on top of them. And those different versions are all different piles of cards that account for different amounts of wildcard reimbursement. The way that that plays out means that I'm in a situation where I open 7 secret rare Gohans, but I still only have 40 out of 100 total wildcard points to be able to craft a UI Goku, which I only pulled 1 of the 178 packs I pulled. So it's not like I didn't spend, and now I'm just super not incentivized to buy more packs because every SR I pull, every god I pull that's not the UI Goku is 1/5 of a card of that rarity that I would have pulled in the next set or the set after that. So at the end of the day, it just does not feel rewarding, and that's all based around the curation of the wildcard system. There's multiple ways to do it. You could either provide players ways to get wildcards in packs, or after X amount of packs are opened, reward players with wildcards. That's the way Magic Arena does it if you really don't want people to play within their collection and start disenchanting cards. But if that doesn't work, of course, course, then just allow people to disenchant additional copies of cards that allows them to make progress towards a wild card to build and craft the things that they want to. We're at a point right now where when I open an alt art variant of a card, whether that's the actual alt art or a premium version, I'm actually upset if it's an SR rarity or higher, because it makes it all that much harder for me to fill out the collection of the unique cards that I would like to play with. I'm short 1 SR Trunks for my master playset, and just like the UI Goku, I just don't want to throw my gems into the void to eventually get an SR wildcard to be able to get there, especially if I end up hitting premium cards that are just going to fill up pointless card slots for cards I don't want. I should be excited whenever I hit a premium, and at the moment there's a lot of situations in which hitting a premium version of a card actually makes me feel worse, and I think that's the opposite reaction you want from that pull. Now, while I think the crafting situation is the heart and soul issue of the economy of the game, I do think a lot of the other systems are more forgivable if you could curate your experience. The other components aren't that great as well. If we account for the gems that you get on your login, your dailies, and your weekly missions, you get about 330 gems per week. And that's assuming you have a starter deck of every color or a full deck, whatever you may have, to be able to fill out the weekly missions that require you to play with a red deck, a blue deck, a yellow deck, and a green deck. For a new player, that means that those are starter missions that they're almost never going to have available unless they dump their gems into getting the starter decks of each color, which means they're effectively paying back the investment they made on starter decks for the first 5 weeks of them accumulating gems. That's assuming that, their new players are not ranking up as quickly. Naturally, some of that math differs when you account for the achievement gems that you get from ranking up through from bronze to god. While I do think there's a balance that Bandai needs to make, given how pay-to-play friendly the whole system is, I do think that at the end of the day, it's just that gap between the free play experience and the own everything play experience that just makes it too hard to overcome, especially when you give the fact that people don't get starter decks out of the gate. You get one and you need to pay for the rest. And then the play experience is just that much harder because of the way matchmaking is, which we're about to get in a second. So unfortunately, we're in a loop where it just feels very unfulfilling to grind your way through an account, whether you're free to play or even pay to play, unless you very specifically pay in a way to be able to own everything. And that's not even to mention that if you do put money in, you have to spend every single gem you have in your account before 90 days goes up. If you weren't aware, paid gems actually expire 90 days after their purchase. And this wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if the game would use those gems first, even though it's really not good. But they actually prioritize the free gems that do not expire in your account before using your expiring gems, which means at any point in time, if you ever spend money to get gems on your account, you need to drain every single gem out of your account before 90 days are over, or else you lose them. This is an unforgivable system in my opinion. I don't know why it exists. It kind of blows my mind that I'm investing money into your system, and then if I just happen to live my life for 90 days and come back afterwards, the gems just disappear out of my account. I think that is grossly unfair to your player base, and in all honesty is almost theft. I don't even know how that's legal, but nevertheless, I think that's a gross system, Bandai, and out of everything else here, this is probably your most egregious choice when it comes to the economy of the system, and I really hope you backpedal on it because it's kind of disgusting. When we look towards improvements, I think there are a lot of things that could be done. Again, for me, number one would be the curation system. In that way, crafting needs to be enabled before you own almost everything. I think that's the number one thing, allowing people to build the decks that they want to play, especially if we account for the fact that it'll probably lead to them spending more money because they feel they can actually curate their experiences and their money is going to go towards the things that they want to, as opposed to forcing your player base to throw money into the void until the RNG blesses them in the ways that they want. I think gems could go up. I think a pack a day feels nice. At a pack a day with a 3-month development cycle of every new set, then you're in a position where you're getting 90 packs over a 3-month period if you play every single day, which is about a little bit more than half a set. I don't think that's necessarily terrible. I think it could be a little bit less than that, and I don't think that's terrible as well. But just having a ballpark of giving people a little bit more feed so that they feel they can make progress, I think would be welcome, but that's not really a hill I'm wanting to die on. Starter decks, though, the second starter deck has no reason to be as expensive as the first, just off the back that you don't even get wildcard reimbursements for all the cards that already come as 4-ofs in those decks. When you're buying a second starter deck, what you're effectively doing is buying 10 additional cards. And I think that's kind of a rip. If that's going to be the case, they really shouldn't be the full price of a starter deck. And then finally, get rid of the 90-day expiration on gems. That's actually just horseshit. A lot of those economical components just end up feeling worse when you account for the fact that new players are constantly facing people with fleshed out decks or, 5 to 6 ranks above what they are. Because currently in the game, there's an issue with It's no secret that matchmaking is currently broken in Fusion World. At this point, you could be a bronze player playing your very first game, and you could actually be matched up against a god rank player, which for the uninitiated is the highest rank you can reach in the client. I feel like I really don't have to explain why that feels absolutely horrendous on both ends. On a new player, you feel like you're constantly playing against people who have better decks than you have or are more experienced than you have, and you're not really learning why you're losing because it's an information overload on the skill gap. And then when you look at the other end, I myself as a god rank player don't enjoy just beating up bronze players who don't know how to play the game. My play experience is actively worse because I'm constantly playing against people who don't know how to play, which means I'm basically mind numbing my way through the ladder. And then that just feeds into the god leaderboard not really mattering because all it is a race of how many people can beat up bronze, silver, and gold level players to get the high score as high as they can for being on top of the leaderboard, as opposed to having god players play each other, which kind of stabilizes and forces the scores to not be as crazy. Right now, I think the number 1 god slot is at like 10,000 points or something like that, which is just kind of ridiculous. I feel like I don't have to delve too deep into that, but when you add the point that the new player experience is really rough because people can't play the decks that they want to, and then you push that to the notion that they're constantly playing people way above their rank level, it just feels really, really bad. And that's on both ends of the spectrum. I don't like beating up bronze level players as much as they don't like being beat up by me. Those are definitely the two biggest components, I will say, in regards to the improvements that we can make to the current ecosystem of the digital client. But there are a few components specific to when we're actually in the game and the surrounding systems around the game that I think are worth talking about. First and foremost is when it comes to gameplay, I think it's just polish or a few decisions in the way that things are that I think could be improved. And that's just general play experience, quality of life stuff. Mulligans are incredibly short. I don't know why they're 10 seconds. And if you watch the intro animations at the beginning of your game, they're actually even shorter, it feels like. Doesn't really give me a lot of time to be able to make my decisions between looking to see if I'm first or second, seeing what my opponent is, and then kind of making decisions based on my hand. I just think 10 seconds is too short. It could easily be double that, and I don't think anyone would mind. The ability to be able to choose if you're going first or second would be nice. While I do understand the desire to expedite the play, I think being able to choose is just a nice quality of life thing that no one's really going to mind. When we crit our opponents, it'd be nice that we're actually able to see the card that gets crit. And this is not just a crit ability. There are a number of times where if my opponent uses a pan, they discard 2 cards from their hand. It also just dumps the cards there. It would be nice for me to be able to visualize the cards that my opponent is sending instead of having to go in the drop, scroll all the way to the end, and then hopefully kind of understand what got put where. Just show it to me. It would make it all that better, especially since for a lot of abilities, we actually don't see them in the game log. If my opponent grabs something from the drop utilizing something like peel off, if I don't see the card that gets put into hand right away, I actually can't go to the game log. It's going to show a blank card. That's not helpful to anybody. If my opponent revealed a card to me, I should be able to go see in the game log specifically what was put. This one's specific to me. I do hand shuffle a lot. It'd be nice if it wasn't so janky. Oftentimes I need to like wiggle the card in between 2 cards to be able to get it there. I love that hand shuffling is a thing we can do in the first place. I would just like it to be tightened up a little bit of polish on that front. In terms of the rune matches, which honestly, I love the functionality altogether, I would just say bump up the tables to 64 as opposed to leaving it at 50. It allows people to be able to run 128-man tournaments, which is just a nicer number than having 100. I don't know what kind of strain that puts on a server, but that would be my recommendation because it allows people to be able to run bigger tournaments at scale without having everyone to just kind of make their own lobby, which is kind of the workaround that people have done, or make multiple lobbies that people are going to have to jump in between. Just kind of a nice quality of life thing there. Matchmaking queues are longer, and I don't know if that's because we're getting less players matching, but I do know that I get kicked out of matchmaking 3 or 4 times now, depending on the time of day, before I actually get a matchup. If you could just keep me in the queue and get me someone in there as opposed to constantly having to click it, I think that would be better. And then finally, account log out and log in. Currently, you need to essentially uninstall the entirety of the client, the launcher, everything about it, and then go into hidden folders in your computer to remove some files to be able to swap accounts. I think this is ridiculous. Why do we need to do that, Bandai? For the love of God, make account logins and logouts a functional thing you can do from the launcher. Doing it the current way it is, and I don't know if that's on purpose or just kind of a workaround, is absolutely ridiculous and is easily one of the questions I get the most often in all my videos. How do I swap accounts? Now, those are all the tangible components between the economy, matchmaking, and gameplay that I think could be improved. This final piece is more so about living with the ecosystem of the live service game and our relationship with Bandai. Specifically, we're looking at it's really tough to have this conversation around communication with Bandai because effectively they've historically never really been good at it. They sometimes make social media posts about decisions that they're making, but generally their way of doing things is throw information out there, whether it be tournament info, organized play info, card set info, anything of the sort, and then just let the community kind of figure it out. More often than not, there's no real explanation as to why the decisions were made the way that they were, or the specific details around the decisions that they made, and we're just kind of stuck there sitting, figuring out. Hopefully information is going to come soon. And like it or not, when it comes to live service games, and a card game is a live service game, whether we're talking about the digital component of Fusion World, or we're talking about the physical component of not only Dragon Ball, but One Piece, Digimon, all the games that they have in their catalog. They're all live service games. You know, you're buying into their system, into their sets every 3 months, and you're buying into the ecosystem of organized play, of local play. And with that, there needs to be some trust building, some understanding of what ecosystem you're buying into. I'm actually going to have a full Twitter thread talking about this, a little bit more of a deep dive, comparing Bandai to other companies and the ways I'd like to improve. So if you guys want to check that out, my Twitter link is down in the description and comments below. But when we're talking specific to Fusion World and the digital client, I think there's 4 big components that I'd like to see, but any additional surrounding communications obviously would be welcome. The first one is the feature roadmap. Is the client feature complete? Are we expected to see new things with the client? Who knows? All we really got was kind of a like pseudo shadow drop of the client, one that wasn't even totally confirmed. It was subject to change, and then it just kind of got dumped on midnight. So it makes me wonder, you know, how much of the progression of the digital client are we going to see? Then there's a conversation around product release timelines. When set 2 comes out, when is the digital client going to get it? Is it going to get it the week before? Is it going to get the week of release? Is it going to get the week after? We're not entirely sure. And that's just one of those transparency pieces where it's like, okay, I bought into set 1, but when do I know as a digital player that I'm going to be able to get into set 2? It's a pretty big deal, especially when you're trying to coordinate playing around the client to prepare for physical play. And then the last 2 are kind of tied in together: event roadmaps and organized play. We know that there's a section for events in the digital client, but what does that detail? What specifically are events? Challenges, which are your way to be able to rank up faster in the ranked ladder, specify something about events. But again, there's no explanation as to what that is. And it's just another example of here's a thing. And then we just kind of left to speculate until eventually at some point more information gets detailed about it. And finally, organized play. That ties into events. Are we going to have specific regionals on the digital client? Are we going to have more ways to play? Are things going to feed into nationals, into worlds? How specifically does the digital client for Fusion World, which for you guys don't know, Fusion World, the entire name is based around the fusion of the physical and the digital. How is that fusion going to happen when we're talking about organized play? And is it going to happen at all? We're already a month deep into what is looking to be a 7-ish month long organized play period, and how much of that is going to be locked into just the IRL play versus the digital play. And that's the biggest thing with the communication piece, is the fact that unfortunately there's a lot of unknowns, and it often feels like Bandai is working on a month-to-month calendar where we get information about things we need to know of a month or 2 in advance, as opposed to a year, which seems to be the standard across multitudes of different TCG companies. You can see that especially when you look at the regional calendars and the fact that we get updates on when regionals are going to happen 2 to 3 months at a time, as opposed to understanding what our greater year is going to look like. And then that creates a whole other issue of people having to spend more money on flights and not having enough time to get PTO and stuff like that. It's a whole thing. At the end of the day, I'm a big stand for transparency, and I think Bandai making a greater effort towards pushing for communication that allows us to buy into the live service nature of everything that they've built would allow for more confidence in myself as a buyer, and for those that I want to promote the game to. I do still love what the client provides us. I think it's a great playground to allow your physical card game players to be able to play in digital and get those games in. Unfortunately, I think the quality of the game suffer because of the way that matchmaking is, and the current player base as a whole is going to suffer in its population if the current systems do not allow players to be able to curate their experiences and build the decks that they want, whether that's free to play or that they want to put money in. If you're the kind of player who just wanted a digital playground, by all means enjoy the client. I'm not telling you to not enjoy it. I'm just pushing for hopefully better, and that Bandai decides to improve the systems that allow for the growth, because at the end of the day, I think having a smaller piece of an absolutely massive pie is significantly better as opposed to having a entire piece of a small tart. That said, I know that these kinds of videos are kind of relatively negative. I'm not trying to push that. If you guys see from my catalog, I love Fusion World. I love making content for Fusion World, and I'm having a lot of fun with the existence of the client. With that said though, I could be wrong. You guys could have different opinions. Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to have a back and forth on the ways that hopefully things can improve. And hopefully Bandai, if you're watching, which I don't know that you are, but I have a feeling that you are, then I hope at least some of this resonates internally in a way that we can see meaningful change with the client to make it better. At the end of the day, I'm only complaining about the specifics that I am because I do enjoy the client and I want to see it better. That's all. That's it. I'll catch you guys on the next one.